Welcome to Biz Break. We'll be bringing you stories from across the globe of people doing cool stuff and finding balance in their lives. So sit back, relax, and prepare for some positive vibes on this episode of Biz Break. Hello, welcome to another episode of Biz Break. Today I'm going to talk just a little bit more about Yap Island. And I was there in 1983 and 84. I spent about 18 months there and got to know a lot of great and wonderful Yapese people, and many of which I keep in touch with and I consider some of my very best friends. And I wanted to mention some stories and a few things about some of the things I was involved with. As a missionary, we went to teach the gospel of Jesus Christ, but we had a lot of latitude in some of the things that we could do, and we got permission to teach school, for example. So a couple of us went out to the high school and talked to the principal. He was very kind. I can't remember his name, but he said, yeah, we'd love to have you teach. In fact, we have a few classes open, and if you'd be happy to teach Micronesian history and biology, then that's wonderful, and we can pay you. We said, no, we don't want to be paid. We'll just come do it for free. We'll volunteer. And so we started school, and teaching school to those kids, most of them were, I think, in about the 10th and 11th grade. And so they were right in that age group. And they were wonderful kids. We got along well with them. We really liked them. And we studied for the lessons the day before every class. With Micronesian history, I think we were learning as much as the students were. And it was very informative. And, we ran our class a lot like you would expect for a high school class. And the kids were just very good. With some of the interesting little stories, maybe funny stories that I remember from the biology was we were using the microscopes one day, and the lesson called for the students to take some cell samples from the inside their mouth and examine those on a lens under the microscope. And everybody got really involved in doing that, and it was a lot of fun. And there was some time left over after the class, and so some of the kids were finding bugs and other things crawling around. And as you can imagine, little creepy crawly things in the classroom and other places, they were taking those bugs and smashing them and putting them on their little slide and examining them under the microscope. And so it was a lot of fun. We all had fun. I couldn't help going and looking at some of that stuff either, and it was just fun to do. So teaching school, we taught from fall of 1983 until spring of 84, full school year, and just had a lot of fun doing it, and got to meet a lot of students, and made a great impression on me as a guy from the United States to go and intermix with those great Yapese kids and just teach them some of the things that we knew, and had some really great discussions. It was a lot of fun. I wanted to mention also, in my last episode, I mentioned that there was a drought and we had to go to the airport and fill our barrels with water. After about 3 months, the drought ended and the rains came, and I had never seen in my life so much rain falling out of the sky. Our little house in Colonia was up on the bluff above the lagoon, and and there was water running under our house. Thankfully, it was up on stilts a little bit. But some of our friends came over and said, "Hey, you guys, there's going to be a huge rainstorm. Are you guys ready? Are you prepared? Could wash your house away." We laughed. I couldn't imagine having so much rain that it would wash a house away. But we said, "Yeah, we're fine. We'll be okay." Well, it just so happens that there was a typhoon, and a lot of rain fell out of the sky, more than I've ever seen in my life. And in fact, we had probably 1.5 feet, maybe 2 feet of water running down the road, the dirt road in front of our house. And some of it was following a path down the road like a little river. Some of it was going under our house and other places. And but it was so neat because it settled all the dust. And because, as I mentioned, the island was in a drought, so it was very dusty and in things, floating around in the air. Well, all that stuff came down to the ground when the rain hit. So we loved it. It was great. But it was very eye-opening for me to see all that rain. And the high winds were just incredible. But thankfully we got through it without any problems. And we had a few individuals that had some problems with their houses, and we went and helped them. One individual on the island, his name was Baynug. Some of you may remember him. He lived in that municipality just outside of Colonia, on the left-hand side of the road as you're going toward Tomil and Gagil. And Baynug was one of our friends. We really liked him. He asked us if we would come and help him build a new house. His house had fallen down. So my friend and I agreed to do that, and we showed up. And it was really funny because we told Baynug we'd be there about 9 or 10 in the morning. I think it was 10 o'clock we said we'd be there. We showed up just maybe 5 minutes late. And Baynug was doing some black magic. And apparently he was asking whoever, the spirits or whatever, if we were coming. And so we walked up. He was waving sticks around and chanting something. And we gave him kind of a hard time. I said, "Baynug, what are you doing?" He says, "I was asking the spirits if you were coming." And we said, "Baynug, we don't check in with those guys. They don't know our schedule." He said, "Well, they told me you would be running a little bit late." Anyway, we thought that was kind of funny. Well, Baynug showed us where he wanted his new house. And he had some materials, some old corrugated tin and some posts and some bamboo and a can of nails, old rusty nails, and a ball-peen hammer that he found somewhere. So my friend and I got to work, and we sunk those posts in the ground and we split the bamboo and toe-nailed that into the post so we could make a floor. Created a little lattice work of bamboo for his floor. And then we created a roof using that corrugated tin and made the walls on each side of the hut and a door on the front and a porch. And so when we got done, maybe it took us 4 hours to finish his little house. And we stood back examining that. It looked pretty nice. And Baynug came up and gave us a hug. Such a nice guy. He got some tears in his eyes, and he said, "That's the nicest house in the village. Thanks so much for helping me build that." And we felt happy to just give him a hand with his hut. And sometimes, not this particular day, but other days, we went out into the village in Tomil, there in Thol, and helped our friends weave coconut leaves for their roof. And that was new for me. I'd never done that before, so I learned quickly how to weave those leaves together and tight so that they could make a layer for the roof for some houses out there. Anyway, it was a lot of fun, and we'd sit around and visit and laugh about things and tell stories, and those were just great times, great memories. So I also wanted to mention, for those of you who don't understand how things work in a hot, humid climate like you might find in Micronesia, there on Yap we had a little Toyota pickup, a 1982 Toyota little short bed pickup, and that's what we used for us to get around, and we'd help our members of our church do different things, and sometimes we would load those members up and bring them into Colonia for church meetings and things. Anyway, that was just when I got to Yap in about May of 1983. That little Toyota pickup was rusting out. It was only like a year and a half, and we called them shower curtain fenders. The fenders were rusting out, and we had a couple of holes in the body. And one day our leader from Guam showed up, and he said, "You guys, don't you ever wash your pickup?" We're like, "Yeah, we wash it once in a while, sometimes." And he said, "You need to take that down and fix those holes and try to fix the body of that pickup up." So he gave us a little money, and we went down and got some Bondo. Now, in Colonia, there on the end of town, as you're going out of town, probably just off the dirt road, there's a little shop for cars, so you can do mechanic work and things like that. I can't remember the guy's name who ran that, but we went out there and bought some Bondo from him and some fiberglass and a few other things, and went home, and we spent a couple of days doing nothing but just working on that pickup. And we plugged all the holes with fiberglass, and we'd scrape that fiberglass smooth with one of those scrapers, and then as soon as that dried, we'd put Bondo over it, sand it down, and so, it was a fairly cheap way to plug holes. But the point I wanted to make is it doesn't take long at all for holes to form in cars, because the salt water coming up off the lagoon and the humid climate and just all of those things together, metal doesn't last long. In fact, I took a wash rag one time just as a joke, a little experiment, and I laid it over a post inside our house to see how long it would take before that thing disintegrated. And it took about a month or so, and that rag was just gone. It, it just was eaten up by the humidity and the other things. Anyway, it was just interesting to me. Coming from the United States, in Idaho, where we have a really dry climate, all that was new to me, and so I found it very interesting. One of the things that was fascinating to me on Yap, and I loved it, was to sit with the older people and listen to their stories. There was a guy that lived out, he wasn't in Tumil, it was in that municipality just kind of south of Tumil. I can't remember the name of it, Mock or something like that. And we'd go and visit him, and he would tell us stories about the old times when he was a boy and the Japanese occupied the island, and all the things that were going on at that time. And he talked a little bit about his memories of World War II. Now, you may know that Yap was not attacked with ground forces by the U.S. and their allies. They just bombed the island. They'd fly over it with their bombers and just bomb the thing to smithereens. And so a lot of those bomb craters were there when I was there in the early 80s. And the islanders, being as resourceful as they are, just used those bomb craters as taro patches. And I thought, wow, how good. Good idea. Anyway, going and listening to the stories of those old timers was just fascinating to me. I love stories, and I consider myself a storyteller. And so just sitting for hours listening to those people was just wonderful. It was gold to me. And we would go out there and sit on this man's porch, and he would just tell us story after story. And one of the stories mentioned the mines that the Japanese were working in, and he heard through the grapevine that at one time there was a plan to, because food was getting scarce, that the people occupying the island were going to herd some of the natives into a cave and blow it up. I don't know anything about that. I haven't seen that in the history books, but apparently it was one of the old stories from the old days. I have no idea if it's even true, but according to this man, it was true. And so those stories, I think, are something that is part of the history of Yap, and I hope somebody has come along and maybe recorded some of those stories. This man talked about those planes that would fly over and drop bombs, and it was very frightening to him as a boy, hearing those bombs whistle down and explode, and he had some talk of stories about the Japanese and how some of their culture came together with Yapese culture, and so the language and some of the things that they did kind of mixed together at that time. Anyway, very fascinating stuff, and I hope that somebody has recorded those stories. Maybe somewhere out there's a book that has that information in it. Now, one of the things that I believed as a visitor to Yap is the same thing I believe for anybody who visits another place. One of the things that you should do if you're a visitor that plans on being there for a while, you need to learn the language and the customs. First of all, when you learn the language of a place that you're visiting, it endears you to the people that you're living around, the natives of that place. And also, you at the same time you're learning the language, you should be learning the customs. Things that those people in that place may find offensive. You need to learn what those things are so that you can avoid anything that would be a problem. And I always, because I was a missionary and I was representing Jesus Christ, I wanted to be my very best, and become like one of the natives there, the Yapese people, and be helpful and be kind, and be able to speak to my friends in their own language. And one of the stories that I thought was funny when I was there, I got to a point where I felt very comfortable speaking Yapese. I could understand it quite well, and I felt like I could speak it quite well too. So I was sitting visiting with my friend Philip Yorlang. Some of you may remember him. Philip was one of my very best friends, and I was visiting with him, and he had his younger son, Junior, playing around there. Junior was maybe 2 or 3 years old. And I said, Philip, I feel very comfortable with my Yapese. How does it sound? Give me some feedback. And he said, oh yeah, Hicks, you're doing fine. It's great. You speak about as well as Junior does. And Junior looked up and kind of laughed, and I thought it was hilarious. But that's, that's good feedback for me. I thought, well, okay, now I know what level I'm on and how much work I need to do. Anyway, things like that are funny to me. But I relish those memories of going out into the village and visiting with people. I remember sitting and visiting Francis Ragon and his family, and we would go out. For anybody who remembers Richard Ken and his family, they were members of our church, and we would go out to their village and walk out there down that long trail, and one day we got there and we were doing language lessons from Ken. He was helping us out with our language, and it was just fun to sit, and we had dinner a few times out there with Ken's, and it was just a fantastic time to visit those people and get to know them. And about maybe 2 or 3 weeks after I got to Yap, we went over to De Leon's house. Some of you may remember the De Leons. They lived just over the hill from our church, and there was a little road that go up a little hill and down the other side, and that was where their house was. And they were just great people. They had a pig that they were butchering, and so we went over to help them do that. And because growing up in Idaho, I was used to butchering animals. We had to do that on our little ranch that we lived. We had for us, we had pigs and beef, and so I knew how to do that. And my friend that worked with me was from Tonga, and he also knew how to butcher, and so we just all got together and helped the De Leons take care of their pig. And then afterwards, it was a kind of a full day activity, and then afterwards we had dinner with them. And so we just had a lot of fun. But things like that stick in my mind, and because it was all part of just getting together and having good memories and happy times with these wonderful people. I wanted to mention too, while I'm talking about learning Yapese, when I got there to Yap in 1983, there was a guy with a last name Jensen. I can't remember his first name, but he was a linguist, and he had figured out an alphabet for Yapese, and then it took a lot of the literature that he could find and translated some of it in using this alphabet that he had developed. And so when I got there, we had access to about half of a Bible, and then there was some little kids literature, little storybooks, and a few things like that. But the lessons that we had, the gospel lessons, we had to translate. And so Richard Ken helped us with that a little bit. And but I remember this Jensen guy. We visited with him a few times, and he's very intelligent and friendly. And he gave us some good advice on how we might go about learning Yapese. And for those of you who have learned a new language, it's not easy. And there's some fairly stark differences between English and Yapese. And so being a native English speaker, and I'm talking about American English, U.S. English, there were some things I had to figure out. And but it was fun to do. And I felt accomplished by learning that language and being able to communicate with my Yapese friends in their own language. The last thing I wanted to mention was some of the memories I have of kind of the neat things about Yap that I'd never seen before. Now, I mentioned the stories that the old people told us about World War II and the Japanese occupying the island and a few of those things. Well, near the old airport, there was an area there where there were some old Japanese World War II planes, some Zeros and some transports, and these planes were old and rusty, and in fact the motor mounts had rusted and broken, and the engines fell off right in front of the planes. And they were just there, probably where they were left the last day the Japanese people military was there. Anyway, it was fun to go and check out those planes, and a few of them you could sit down on inside, and it was just fun, kind of fun to check them out. Things like that were very intriguing to me. There's an anti-aircraft gun. I think that's what it was. A big gun sitting mounted on a pole on one of the roads down about the center part of the island, as I recall. And if you walked around the island, you could find wreckage of a few of those old World War II aircraft. And also, out on the edge of the reef, so a few hundred yards off the main island there in Colonia, you could see an old ship of some kind out on the reef. And I don't know what it was for sure. As I recall, somebody told me it was a ship that wrecked there and got stuck, and they just left it. And then, as I recall, also there was some landing craft right there. I think there was one near the community center there in Colonia, and a few others here and there. But things like that were just fascinating to me, and I really enjoyed going and looking at them and checking them out to see, how they were. And I got some pictures, I think, of a few of them. Anyway, thanks for listening today. It's been fun to visit about these things and reminisce about my memories of Yap. And like I said, to me, the most wonderful thing about being on Yap Island is the people. I just loved all of those people I met and became friends with. And a lot of the members of our church, and we met some people that were not members, but we were just friends with them. Those kids that we taught in school, I just have lifelong memories of those great people. And God bless you. I hope you're doing well. Thanks for listening. You've been listening to Biz Break, product of Voice Right Media.